Welcome back. Thank you all for coming back to the podcast. I am Michael Thomas, and I'm Michael Thomas. We'll get into the rest of that. We'll get specifically into where Reggie is in a second. Well, in a few minutes, second, minute, whatever it is. Just hang out long enough, and you'll find out what happened to Reggie as if something happened to him. But with that said, like I said, I'm your host, Michael Thomas, and thank you again for coming back to the Dating While Adulting podcast. Please, as I always say, go to datingwhileadulting.com to see new content. Thank you all for coming back. Go to podcast at datingwhileadulting.com to send us messages. Let us know what you think and all of that good stuff, and we'll get back to you. We'll respond both via email and on air. Now, part of the thing about, one other thing to mention is please forgive me in the way that I look. I am just coming back from vacation, a well needed vacation. I don't know if it was well deserved or not, but it really doesn't matter. It was a vacation that I wanted to take, a vacation that I took. And as a result, I didn't get to shave. So, oh well, it's the price you pay. But again, thank you all for coming to the show. Welcome to the show. It's like I think we're going to refer to this as the start of our season two. And I don't even know why that's a big deal or why it's a deal at all, because for people that's listening and watching on YouTube, the few people that do watch on YouTube, uh, I don't think anybody cares whether it's season one, season two, season eight, or whatever. I don't think anybody cares what we call it. But it does feel kind of like a season two type vibe to me because one of the things that me and Reggie were celebrating with this episode, even though Reggie isn't here right now, the thing that we're celebrating in this episode is the fact that this is our 6th month in podcasting. And I don't really know what I expected to come out of this when I first started. I'm not one of those people that makes long-term goals like I want to be a billionaire or something like that. I'm the type of person that makes incremental goals. So get a podcast up, tell people about it, get listeners, grow the base, things like that. Those are things that I am used to doing. So I don't know what the expectations were, but I'm happy with where we are now and what we've put out for the past 6 months. Not to say it was perfect by any stretch, definitely not that. And judging by some of your criticisms, yeah, it definitely is not perfect. But I hope that in the 6 months that you've been listening to us, or for however long you've been listening to us, you've at least seen growth and some progress and something that entertained you during the course of this time that kept you coming back. But I'm proud to say again, it's been 6 months. Also, we are well past 1,000 downloads to the podcast, so that's something that's really exciting to me. Another thing that's really exciting and kind of surprising actually is the fact that we me and Reggie, we have people who have downloaded the podcast in different countries, like 3 or 4 different countries. Now I don't know what to make of that, and I don't know what they think. I don't know i don't know anything about that. It's all just weird to me when I was like looking at the analytics and looking at where the traffic was coming from and just seeing these blips where you don't think blips should be. So hey, hopefully whoever's listening out there, they're enjoying what they're listening to. And it also speaks to the fact that there are people outside of our family and friend network that are actually listening to the podcast. So that's cool, because you can only go so far with family and friends, to be honest. I mean, I, God knows I love my family. I love my friends. They're great. But what it comes down to is family and friends are just like regular listeners. I mean, they could love you and everything like that, but if you're not giving them things, that content that entertains them, they're not going to listen. And that's been the case with a lot of my family and a lot of my friends. I had a couple people who were just like, I just don't do podcasts. I just don't get into that podcast thing. It's like, I love you. If you needed a monetary donation, I'd give you that. I don't know what that would do, but yeah, as far as downloading and listening, yeah, if you get me, you get me. And while I appreciate the honesty, It's just funny to hear. But the thing that's interesting about it is in this, how can I put it? This podcast, the premise of it is that we're talking about dating, but from an older perspective. Neither myself nor Reggie, we're not 20 years old or 30 years old anymore, even though every now and then we will get in a weird conversation about Cardi B and Offset, which, like, we know something about that. Excuse me. But the point is, we cater to an older audience. Excuse me again. Yeah, like I said, we cater to an older audience. And as such, an older audience, they're not necessarily like in tune with the latest in technology or advancements in that area and stuff like that. I've had a couple friends who were just like that. I just actually had to walk them through the process of downloading an app so they can access the podcast. A lot of people I talk to, they didn't even know how to get a podcast to listen to it. Some people I even had to explain what a podcast was. So even though our subject matter relates to them specifically, because, is dating, it's relationships, and that's something that everybody can relate to, because even at this age, one thing is for sure: either you are married, either you are dating someone or multiple people, or you're in this space where you're looking for someone to date. Now, there are a few outliers, obviously, who are just like taking time for themselves or whatever, and trying to figure some stuff out within themselves. But that's all trying to get themselves prepared to jump back into the dating pool. And the thing that's so interesting and weird about all of that is that it doesn't stop, and it doesn't get to a point where you're over that hump and everything's just smooth perfection. I know a lot of married people that complain about being married. I know a lot of people who are single and dating who complain about being single and dating. I know a lot of people in relationships that complain about being in relationships. And the weird thing about it is that these aren't 20 and 30-year olds. These are like 40 and 50-year olds who are still complaining about some of the same things that 20 and 30-year olds used to complain about. So things don't change that much. And like I said, the subject matter relates to people in this age group. But the difference in this podcast and other podcasts that talk about dating and stuff like that is that we can speak to it from a different perspective. We can speak to it having had more experience in dating. When I say we, it's not just myself and Reginald, it's everybody, all you all listening, most of you all listening who are of a certain age, as people might say. And hey, if some 20 and 30-year olds are like digging it too, hey, pick up on some of this game and just know that I hate to say it, but it might get easier, but you won't find perfection. It'll be far from it. So that's interesting. So I mentioned all of that because, it's an older audience. I'm having to teach people how to get the podcast, listen to the podcast. Fortunately, people have been listening to the podcast, and even more fortunate, this podcast has expanded beyond our friends and family network because they can only take us so far. The cool thing about these numbers that we're getting now is that we're getting them from people that we don't know. So that's pretty cool. And so, and let me just go back for a second. I just find it hard. I talk about 40 and 50-year olds and the trouble that we're having in dating, but it's just shocking how hard it is for this age group to find love. That's just an aside. Because you would think at this age and at this stage of our lives, the games would be over and the crazy high expectations, we'd be past all of that. And we just be settled into a place where we can just say, okay, I'm not getting any younger. this is what I can deal with. Obviously, you don't want to deal with anything that's like crazy and a fuck shit or anything like that. But with that said, days of like talking about I want to do this with a 8 pack and all of that, or a woman that's like shoot just perfectly toned. I think that's a little bit much to ask, but you would think that people in this age range would be more settled and established and understanding of themselves and what they're looking for and what's best for them. But hate to break it to everybody because everybody that's listening, they already know the same thing that I'm about to tell you. No, it does not get any easier. Uh, Sucks for us. But with all that said, moving on, because this is an episode not about me venting or anything like that. This is about appreciation. So let me continue to express my appreciation and talk about the podcast in the past and the podcast moving forward. I want to shout out a few people who have really stepped up and have really been helpful in making this podcast grow. First things first, I want to shout out the women that have been on the show, the Nicole's of the world. Well, Nicole's of the world, only one Nicole, Pamela, Tisha slash Roni. And for the most recent episode, the episode Monday that featured Reggie's sister, Erica, and Mingo, that was entertaining. And for people that watched it, just know that for as interesting as that episode was, there was a whole lot more that got cut out of it that was just even more interesting. So shout out to the women who have been a part of the show and who have made it better. Also shout out to a couple other people. Uh, my main man Garnett, he's one of those people that I had to like explain to him what the podcast was, what a podcast was, walk him through the steps of how to download it and access it, all of that good stuff. And when I did it, I was just like, okay, I'm showing him this, but you know, he's just supportive. He's been my best friend for a long time. So of course he's going to, support me in one way or another. But the thing about it is that has surprised me is that he has turned out to be like one of, if not the most faithful listeners, critiquers, encouragers, all of that. So shout out to him. Also shout out to my man P. P also is one of those people who have been super supportive and just marketing, getting on people to listen, shouting it out, and all kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool. And there are obviously other people that I could mention. I just can't think of who they are right now. But those two stood out just because of how far above and beyond they went and helping to get this thing off the ground and just encouraging, being encouraging and stuff like that. Because I tell you what, boy, if you give somebody a chance to shit on your stuff, they'll shit on your stuff and taking little subtle jabs and all of that stuff. So shout out to those two. Shout out to the women and any and everyone else who has been along the ride, along with us for the ride. Also, I want to take this moment to shout out everybody who has had a criticism. I'm not one of those people that necessarily believes in haters. Well, I do believe in haters, but the difference in someone who's being constructive in criticism and a hater is that a hater would just be like, you ain't shit. So that doesn't really tell me much about how to get better. It doesn't tell Reggie much about how to get better. But if somebody comes along and says, you ain't shit, and these are the reasons why, that's not hate. That's just constructive criticism. A lot of people like to think of anything that they hear as being negative about themselves as being hate and coming from a hater. And nah, if you think that we not shit, you need to tell us that we're not shit. But while you're telling us that we're not shit, you need to tell us why we're not shit. Because not to say that we'll take all suggestions and not that we've taken all suggestions as to the direction of the podcast and things that we should do more of or do less of. We do take those things under advisement. And yeah, so shout out to all of those people. Shout out to everybody who's been positive and also to those who have been critical. Like, for example, one of the big criticisms that I've gotten has been from a few people that have asked if I am really serious about wanting to find love and get married and all of that stuff, even though I say it. A lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people have questioned whether I'm playing radio, playing podcasts and stuff like that by talking this game, but I'm just shooting women down just so I can get content for the show. And nothing could be further from the truth. I am serious about this journey, and that journey is what started the podcast. And while I know I addressed this on the podcast in the past, still, it is something that's worth mentioning again because, like I said, I've been questioned by a few people about what my true intentions were. And even on that day when I do meet my soulmate, twin flame, whatever you want to call it, and I do find love and all of that, I'm still going to continue the podcast. I'm still going to talk my talk about what how I feel about relationships and women and even men. So finding someone that I'm just dating exclusively isn't going to stop or change the direction of this show. When I find that person and start dating them and all of that stuff and fall in love and stuff like that, it's not like this is going to turn into a love podcast because I know way too many people and I hear way too many stories and the frustrations that people go through. So, no, I am 100% sincere and legitimate in everything that I say and do on this podcast. So that's the criticism that I've heard about myself, or the question. It's not really a criticism, but the question I've heard. And that brings me to Reggie. Now, Reggie's not here, as you all probably can tell by now, considering we're like 17 minutes in. But one of the other criticisms, one of the main criticisms that we've had has been about Reggie. And like I said, Reggie's not here to speak for himself, so I won't speak for him. But you know, yeah, I'll just put it like this: we've heard the criticisms. Reggie has heard the criticisms, and when Reggie comes back, we'll talk about those criticisms. Now, and since I just brought up Reggie, and since we talked about the criticisms and things like that, well, actually, those are two different things because this isn't about criticism of Reggie. This is about where Reggie is actually. Reggie has a lot of things going on in his world, and this podcast is one of many things. Reggie has described himself as that person who is like a squirrel because he can be into something and then get easily distracted and pulled in another direction. My knowing this about Reggie for 30 years, I can't honestly say that, well, can honestly say that I've known that about him. That's always been who he is. And he has a lot of irons and a lot of different fires. And that's cool. As a result, I can't say that Reggie is going to be a part of every single episode of the podcast, but I don't want anyone thinking that we're never going to see Reggie again because Reggie is going to be here as much as he would like to, given his contributions. But if Reggie has something else to do, you know, I'll take it and you know, carry it wherever it needs to go. And hopefully you all will just stick with me, stick with Reggie when he comes, and we'll have the same type of show with a few tweaks and stuff like that. But that's Reggie's thing. Um, Another thing, going back to you know the purpose of this podcast, and people saying that Reggie's a little bit too argumentative, which is the criticism. I didn't mention what it was, but that's it. People think that Reggie's a little bit too argumentative. Some people like it, some people don't. It's very polarizing. I will say that the goal of this show isn't to turn people off. It isn't. It's to invite people to have honest conversations. And the one thing that I will not do, well, actually, one of the things I can't do because it's is Reggie's show as well. I can't censor Reggie. And so I won't do that. And even if I could censor Reggie, I wouldn't do that because what I want for everyone, the guests on the show, Reggie, myself, we all need to be in a place to speak our truth. And I think when we speak our truth, I think everyone has the option to speak their truth and combat someone else's truth. And when I say truth, it's really not truth. It's just a whole bunch of opinion that we kind of pass off as truth. You know, when someone says that women ain't shit or men ain't shit, that's opinion. People might say, well, that's my truth based on my experiences. No, your truth is what you went through with that one particular dude or that one particular woman. When you get into opinion land is when you apply that to every man or every woman. So, but with that said, we welcome and we want honest conversation, and we're not closed off. We encourage anyone can be on the show to discuss their issues or the issue that they have with something that I've said or something that Reggie has said, you know. And I do acknowledge that there is a war going on between the two sexes. Men don't seem to like women, women don't seem to like men. We'll claim to love each other, but we don't show that we like and respect each other. And in that war between the sexes, you know, you hear all kinds of things. I'm not a big relationship podcast watcher or listener. That's not my thing. That's not what I do. And part of the reason is because I don't want to get distracted. I don't want anyone else's opinions to subconsciously impact my own opinion. So I don't listen to that stuff at all. And so, but I do hear about things, women having podcasts where they dog men and men having podcasts where they dog women. And I try to stay away from that stuff because even though I might agree with some of it, I just don't like the whole idea of one group solely bashing another group without taking an inventory of their own group. And it reminds me of that time where we had that brief discussion about that Kevin Samuels episode. And looking back at it, that really was something that I kind of regretted talking about. And it's nothing against Kevin Samuels. It's like, honestly, I hadn't listened to a lot of them. And when we talked about him, I didn't know who he was. And I'm just speaking honestly. Reggie brought him up and was saying, hey, we should talk about this. And I was like, okay. I watched a little bit of the video and I was like, okay, we can talk about it based on what that was about. Since then, it seems like I hear about him every day. It's amazing how you go from never hearing anything about someone to hearing about them all the time. But with that said, and again, this isn't to knock him at all. It's like from what the little that I've seen of some of the things that he said, I agree with him on some stuff. So this isn't some hate stuff at all. Shoot, everybody needs to take an inventory and yeah, but I just don't want to be a part of a group that is solely on talking about another gender unless you are going to bring up deficiencies in your own gender. You can't spend all day, every day talking about how women ain't shit without acknowledging some of the stupid stuff that men do. And vice versa. Women can't spend all day talking about how men ain't shit without talking about some of the things that women do themselves. So that's that. So I just prefer to keep all of our conversations in house, keep it about relationships, keep it less about women suck, men suck, and all of that stuff. And yeah, that's the way I see it. Because man, I tell you what, I'm not looking to be angry or butthurt or anything like that. Obviously, I have frustrations with the opposite sex, and the opposite sex would have frustrations about my gender. And it's fair to express those. But yeah, I'm just not on some hating stuff. And I'm hearing about more and more men who are on that. And it's just weird to me. And again, not knocking it because I do agree with some of the things that they're saying. Actually, I agree with a lot of the things that they're saying. But when you say it with that kind of attitude and stuff like that, I don't think that's productive. But hey, what can I say? We're just a fledgling podcast. It just started up 6 months ago. That's proud to get numbers over this course of time. The thousands or so that we get, which is something that these people that I'm referring to get in an episode. So, what do I know? But I'm going to keep it the way that I keep it, and I'm going to stay focused on, our age range, relationships in general, trying to keep it classy, even though we really, we really don't keep it classy. Yeah. But so and but with that said, you also have to accept that not everything that you hear is going to be something that makes you feel good. One of the things that's funny to me is as much time as I spend defending women against Reggie and all of that, it kills me to still have women say that I'm bashing them. And I'm just like, hold up a second. Do you not hear? So if I say like one bad thing, if I talk about women being fat or something like that, it just like negates all of the good things that I've said about women, all of the times that I've defended women. And that's something that we need to get out of. Everybody needs to take their own inventory. And yeah, yeah. So that's that. So that's primarily what I wanted to say. Just wanted to express my appreciation for everybody coming and watching the podcast. Everybody, I keep saying watching the podcast because even though we're on YouTube, nobody watches the YouTube feed, which is cool. Uh, thankfully, though, people are downloading and listening, which is more preferable to me. But hey, if you want to do them both and tell 50 friends to tell 50 friends, hey, I'm cool with that too. So that's that. Thank you all for coming. But before I leave, I just want to say one last thing or a few last things. I mean, I have time. I can say whatever I want. I am late to the party, but I did want to send a shout out. I guess it's not a shout out because they're dead. But I did want to mention DMX, Shock G, and Black Rob. And it's not just that they were rappers that passed. I want to make sure to make a point to shout them out because for the demographic of this podcast, those three fit into that demographic. And it speaks to how we're dying younger and we need to do a better job as a people, as a generation of taking care of ourselves. Because I tell you what, man, it, it is a little bit jarring to hear people back to back to back in your age range that like a couple years older than you that are dying. It's funny because me and Reggie had the health episode and we made a lot of jokes about it because it was funny to us. But the seriousness behind it, the intent behind it is true. And the intent behind it is that we all need to do better. We all need to do a better job of taking care of ourselves, both mentally and physically. You know, Shock G had kidney failure. I mean, Shock G, Black Rob had kidney failure. Don't know what that came from, but both DMX and Shock G, they had demons and demons that they relied on chemicals to help kind of manage, suppress, whatever you want to call it. But, we made jokes during that health episode about being fat and dudes with pot bellies and their dicks not working and all of that stuff. But we need to do a better job of taking care of ourselves. Because I tell you what, man, and I'm saying man as if there's a man that I'm talking to. But yeah, I tell you what, this life is not for punks. And I know that we all want to like sit back and enjoy the fruits of our labor. You know, you worked hard, you put in all this work, and it's like you just want to sit back and chill, not work as hard, not work out. You want to eat what you want to eat. You feel like you deserve that because you've been on this earth for so long, grinding. But the thing that sucks about this life is because we're older, that means that we have to work harder. We need to concentrate more on our health. We need to work out more. We need to eat healthier, which is contradictory considering we just want to chill and have fun because we work so hard. But we need to be conscious. We need to make conscious choices about what we want to do. And so, yeah, I just felt the desire to mention that. I wanted to also send a special shout out to Black Rob because he made the song Whoa and he mentioned Cleveland in it. And he did that at a time when there were a few people shouting out Cleveland, but he shouted out Cleveland. And therefore, he has a special place in my heart. DMX saw him twice, I think, in 2 years ago. And so little did I think that he'd be dead in 2 years. And yeah, I don't really have anything on Shock G. I like Digital Underground, but you know, it's cool. It's cool. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for attending. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll be back in some form or fashion next week. Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever. And it'll be less of the appreciation, more of the topics, because I have topics to discuss, things I want to talk about. So there'll be more of that Tuesday or Wednesday. I don't know which day yet, but check for it Tuesday or Wednesday. And also look at the website datingwhileadulting.com, because I had gotten away from writing the after posts, but I'm going to get back to that and go and read what I have to say, my ramblings and stuff like that. And for myself and for Reggie, again, I am so incredibly appreciative. Reggie is so incredibly appreciative of you all following us and continuing to listen. And we promise to give you more stuff to listen to. And hopefully, we can get those numbers up so we can compete with those people that are bashing the opposite gender to show some type of balance. Yeah. Thanks. Bye. Say goodbye. Well, Reggie's not here, so he can't say goodbye. So I'll say bye for him.